Before I get to the whiskey, I wanted to thank everyone for watching. These are weird times and scary times for a lot of people, so I am extra grateful that you are tuning in. I have no words of wisdom about these circumstances other than please take care of yourselves and thank you. Now, time to drink some Irish whiskey, as one does. Old Bushmills Distillery has a whole lot of history, and so I'm going to save most of that history for a future episode. I'm going to focus mostly on a couple of decades that are the most relevant for these whiskeys today. From 1972 to 1988, Bushmills Distillery was owned by Irish distillers. During that time, Brown-Forman, the owners of Jack Daniel's and Old Forester, was the sole distributor of Bushmills in the United States. Once Pernod Ricard bought Bushmills in 1988, they eventually had their own distribution deal. Within Brown-Forman, the Joseph Garneau Company was the one who actually did the distribution for Bushmills for a number of years. I did some research, and per the New York Times, New York Magazine, the Chicago Tribune, and Popular Science, the Joseph Garneau Company showed up as the distributor for Bushmills from 1981 to 1983. This bottle has no government warning, which would put it before 1989. It has the notation that the sole distributors for the United States is the Joseph Garneau Company in Louisville, Kentucky. The alcohol is measured in proof, while the actual liquid volume is measured in milliliters. So this would put it between 1980 and 1989. The bottle also has some residue from where a tax stamp most likely was, which is what makes me think this is from before 1985, in that 1981 to 1983 period. This sample is from another 200 milliliter bottle that I bought 4 years ago, and I loved it. It had no tax stamp, its alcohol was measured in ABV, it did not have a government warning, and Brown-Forman was the name listed as the distributor of that bottle. That led me to believe that the bottles from after 1985, but before 1989, and it still had Brown-Forman on the label as the distributor, so I figured it's from around that 1987, 1988 period. Finally, there's this little mini here with the so-so fill level. It has all the things. It has ABV, it has milliliters, it has government warning, it has a UPC code, but it still lists Brown-Forman as its distributor. The government warning was required as of 1989. So my thought that this falls right there at the start, somewhere around 1989 or 1990. Early 80s Old Bushmills. Around 87, 88 Old Bushmills. And 89 to 1990 Old Bushmills. These are all 40% alcohol. And I normally would not add water to something of that strength, but this whiskey I had tried before with water and it had improved. So I will be adding water to these after I try them neat. Early 80s Old Bushmills. Canned peaches, roses, Midori sours. A little bit of this like dusty library book smell. Irish soda bread. A little bit of Nilla wafer. 87 to 88 Bushmills. Geraniums, roses, wildflowers, dried apricots, a touch of butterscotch, menthol, and a little bit of moss, and a little bit of grassiness. Late 80s to early 90s, Old Bushmills. So far this one has the flattest nose of the three. It's also the breadiest. It also has this Canadian Club style, like whiskey flavored neutral spirit smell. Yeah, the caramel note picks up a bit with time, but it's still like around the edges. You have just a little bit of dried fruit in there. Cheers. The mouthfeel is much thicker than I expected, especially for something at 40% alcohol. There's quite a bit of vanilla and brown sugar. It's mildly sweet, it's mildly bitter. There's a dusty note to it, which might be old bottle effect. It's part newspaper, part metal, part glass, but it's not off-putting at all. Cheers. There's more spice to this one. cayenne, cinnamon sticks, a little bit of nutmeg, and some doses of vanilla extract and almond extract. This has a little bit of that old bottle effect note, but it's a little quieter. The bitterness is not a woody bitterness. It's a very herbal, sprightly bitterness. Brown sugar, caramel, and baked apple sweetness. I recognize this distillery is in the Ulster, but a happy late St. Patrick's Day. It's still, it's still relatively flat, but there's fruit and there's vanilla. It has a little bit of this apple and nectarine note, which lifts it up a bit. Its finish matches its palate, which is neither offensive nor remarkable. It's fine. It's time to hydrate. The hydrated version. Flowers and fruits. You get lychee, you get peaches, roses, wildflowers, that sort of thing. A little bit of gummy bears. The hydrated version. Oh yeah, this is a beautiful spirit. I mean, it's grassy, but it's fruity. Stone fruits in season, like white nectarines, white peaches, apricots, and dried apricots. It also has a little bit of menthol in there. It's like this little rumble underneath. The hydrated version. Seems a little fruitier, a little fresher, a little less stale. It starts to have similar butter and fruit and flower notes as these do. And there's that little bit of like menthol too. It's really interesting that it was on here. It's starting to sneak into this one. It's getting more cardboardish, more papery, more woody bitterness, which is really not appreciated. It really is not doing it any favors at all. There are brown sugar notes and maybe a little bit of like pie crust notes and something slightly salty and savory. A little bit of bitter greens. It feels like more of a solid unit now. Totally and utterly inoffensive. You got vanilla, you got sugar, maybe a little bit of peach, just a tiny bit, but probably something that would be much better on the rocks. And here are some final thoughts about them in general. This is my favorite by far. It's great when neat, and it shines even when diluted below 40%. This is best when neat. Things just go south real fast on the palate once you add any water. This is still good. This is still leagues better than the current version of Bushmills White Label, but I don't foresee myself buying this anymore. I may be wrong about when this is from. This could be later on in the 90s. Pernod Richard could have kept Brown-Forman as their distributor for a while. This has some distant connections to these, but the producer, I believe, went overboard on the grain whiskey half of things. It is trending really close to Canadian Club. That is not a great sign when it comes to Bushmills, when they clearly made some fabulous blends at some point in time. I'm going to pour this to this. I wish you and yours a good evening. Thank you.
Blueberry and strawberry.
Sounds like my time is up.